So welcome to the Growing Up X exhibit that is on display at the Grayslake Heritage Center and Museum. This is on loan from the Illinois State Museum, and we've added Grayslake stories and Grayslake artifacts to it. It's all about being a kid in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, so growing up as a member of Gen X. This is the generation between boomers and millennials, and they're often overlooked, but an important part of the makeup of our audience here. We start with some of the news articles, headlines and things that were happening in the world when Gen Xers were growing up. Anything from the earliest Gen Xers, they were born in 1965, so they would have been 4 years old when we landed on the moon, all the way to the Bears winning the Super Bowl, the Challenger exploding, the Berlin Wall falling, Princess Diana and Prince Charles getting married, all the way up to 1980s when the last of Gen X was born. So they were growing up into the mid-1990s. There's been some mixed emotions about seeing all these things in a museum. This Teddy Ruxpin doll, for example, when the curator was putting this exhibit together, they were ordering a bunch of artifacts and items from eBay and other secondhand places, and they opened up this one and a whoosh of secondhand smoke came flooding out of it. So instead of telling the story of Teddy Ruxpin as a toy, this section is about secondhand smoke, and it says, "Give Teddy Ruxpin a sniff. This is what Gen X childhood smelled like." People were smoking on airplanes and in restaurants. You might have had a non-smoking section, but it was about 2 feet away from where you were currently sitting in the non-smoking one. The exhibit says COVID-19 wasn't the first brush with a public health crisis that Gen Xers had. There was a lot of fear and kind of lack of information and lack of understanding with AIDS. As more information came out, people became more aware, but there was a lot of public service announcements and a lot of worry about, could you get it from a toilet seat? Could you get it, going into a public place, before they realized it was blood to blood or fluid contact. A lot of school assemblies, I'm sure Gen Xers will remember, with "Dare" and "Just Say No" as the slogans, and frankly remembering it just as something they had to sit through in class. The Gen Xers themselves have a lot of questions about how effective this program actually was. The Illinois State Museum collected toys from all over and filled one case, and then we put a call out to Grayslake residents asking for toys that they had, and actually ended up having to get and fill a second case to fit all of the toys that people brought. And when you think about being a kid, the toys you played with, I mean, that's the crux of it right there. So when you would earn your free personal pan pizza for meeting your book reading goals. This is a mix of items that came traveling with the exhibit and were brought in by Grayslake residents. Those bell-bottom pants were worn to CLC, to disco lessons. The prom dress over here was worn by a current Grayslake resident. There's a picture of her in it. There was a mom in here a couple weeks ago trying to explain to her 5-year-old how Blockbuster worked. Today you go on your TV and you scroll through and you pick a movie, and she said you used to have to drive to a building and you'd walk through the room and you'd pick your movie up. Andy's Records in Grayslake loaned us some of the albums on display, and others belonged to local residents or came with the exhibit itself. From grunge to hip hop to Latin music, pop music obviously, but metal, the 70s, 80s, and 90s had just a broad range of music that you could hear on the radio that crossed over the different channels. So this is about the Grayslake Fire Department. The former fire chief is on our exhibit committee, and there were some big fires in Grayslake specifically when Gen Xers were growing up. The bowling alley burned down, and then a restaurant called the Electra on Center Street also caught fire. There are a couple pagers in there. Anywhere the firefighter went, they could get a page, they could get beeped and know that they were needed to help with a fire. Probably one of the more important sections of the exhibit, even though it doesn't have artifacts, it's about being a latchkey kid. It's about going home and your parents aren't there, and you might call someone at work, a parent or an adult at home, to check in, and then you kind of had your time to yourself until everyone got there. And all of these quotes that are on this wall, on this door, are from Grayslakers who remember, rushing home to watch Scooby-Doo. One of the parents was talking about how they were so unsupervised as kids, and they think that might be part of why they're so important to them that they supervise their kids. We have a Macintosh computer with that just iconic mouse, the angled one-button mouse, and that came after the Apple II. When it came out, it would have cost more than $4,000 at the time. So if you account that for inflation, that's more than $10,000 $10,000 today for a computer. And then there's the various sizes of floppy disks sitting next to it. Someone once told me they saw someone hold up a disk and say, look, someone 3D printed the save button. We have an answering machine, we have a brick cell phone and a bag phone. Those brick phones weighed about 2.5 pounds. It took 10 hours to charge them, and you'd get about 30 to 35 minutes of talk time. If you wanted to share information with your friends, you were writing it out in paper, looking like you were very diligently taking notes. Gen Xers were the first generation to really get into video gaming and home video game systems. The NES, the Nintendo Entertainment System, was adapted to look more like a VCR, where you inserted your game into it and it took off. We have in this case a Game Boy, a Nintendo, a Sega Genesis, and then a ColecoVision. In this space, when people come, this is just like your own rec room at home. You can play with anything in here. You can flip through the magazines, you can switch between something on the VCR or play the Nintendo. We've got Super Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt on there. You can play with the Pac-Man. There's a crate full of other movies. If you don't want to watch Labyrinth, you want to watch something else. The pictures on the walls are from Grayslake residents. So this exhibit will be open until next June. We have it for a year. We're open from 12 to 4, Wednesday through Saturday, and then whenever there's a Grayslake Farmers Market. Find us at grayslakeheritagecenter.com. We're also on Facebook and Instagram at Grayslake Heritage Center, and you can also follow our partners, the Grayslake Historical Society.